Milwaukee's MX Fuel equipment system revolutionizes the light equipment market by delivering the performance and durability demanded by the trades. From the MX Fuel cut-off saw and MX Fuel sower machine to the MX Fuel power supply and the MX Fuel tower light, MX Fuel has you covered without the hazards associated with emissions, noise, vibration, and the frustrations of petrol maintenance. MX Fuel, equipment system, equipment redefined. This episode is also brought to you by our friends at RIXX. RIXX is an Australian lifestyle brand founded with a mission to transform the eyewear industry by creating carefully crafted eyewear that inspires confidence. Everybody should be able to enjoy a touch of luxury and the confidence it brings. See the world differently today. Head online now at rixeyewear.com.au and check it out. Righto, let's get into the show. Paddy Steinfort in the building. Welcome to Ausmerican Aces, mate, and thank you so much for your time. It's great to see you again. We know where we last caught up, and it's always a great time. I've only known you for a short amount of time, but mate, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. I've always wanted to do this with you after understanding your story over a few beers, but I wanted it in person, none of this Zoom call stuff, because I know where you live.
Good to be here.
So thank you, mate.
Appreciate it.
Let's just set the scene from the top. Everyone at the moment needs to, I just need to set the scene here.
Probably good, because I'm not the same as some of the famous names you get on.
We get athletes, right? But you are an athlete. People, even I didn't even know this. We're having beers in Mexico and Vegas. Only just recently doing a little bit of prep. I don't like to do too much because I'll ask it live. But we're talking about Patrick Mahomes in Mexico at JK and Kenzie's wedding, and just talking about how you were working with him individually with what you do, which we're going to talk about in a second. Fast forward. I'm back here in Melbourne, Super Bowl day, watching the great man get to work. But I saw on LinkedIn an article come out, and they talked about, his mindset and, things that he's developed and some great patterns of, behavior that he's, been instilled in his brain from so many coaches. But one in particular was you, and he's named you in the lead up to the Super Bowl. You've worked closely with Patrick. You've worked closely with the Sixers, the Blue Jays. You're working with some other teams at the moment, which I'll get you to touch on. But let's just start with Patrick Mahomes. Like, how cool was it, A, to work with him, but B, for him to shout you out Super Bowl week?
Yeah, that was pretty. It was definitely unexpected, and it was cool. As a 18-year-old, 16-year-old, 14-year-old, I loved NFL, and I used to sit on my parents' couch and watch it at whatever time it was on, right, Super Bowl. And so to have that happen was kind of surreal a little bit. It was also extra cool because I was I can't remember if it was the Socceroos or Matildas, which is one of the groups that I'm working with now. We were in camp and I knew the Super Bowl was on the next day, so I tried to block off some time in camp to be able to watch it. And this came through overnight, so my phone's blowing up, and it was definitely a day to remember. Also, great to watch him then go and win his second MVP, and just a good day overall.
Mate, it's awesome. It was awesome, and we're so lucky to see blokes like LeBron James and Tom Brady, and you can tell Mahomes is the next one coming through, and he's only young and what he's done already. But for you to have worked with him, it's so cool. Before I ask you what you were doing with him and what you've done, talk to everyone about what your role is and, what your LinkedIn profile would say about yourself. It's the easiest way to really ask someone.
Profile, yeah.
What's it say? Your title?
Well, it probably makes me look better than I am, but
they always do, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. That's the job of it, right? The title is Performance Director. That's currently what it's listed as at Football Australia. So that means with the Socceroos and the Matildas, and in particular in those roles, it's a much more almost like a borderline GM role, because I'm managing the staff and the coaches that manage the players. So it's higher than I've been before, I guess, if you're looking at an org chart. Very, very cool challenge, very, very big challenge, because we're battling against the likes of England and America, and we don't have the same money or talent pool as them. So interesting challenges. But my job is in those instances, to put the right pieces in place. In the other teams that I work with, either as a consultant or individually as part of some of the athletes' entourages.
And name some of these places so people understand.
I don't like name dropping.
I know, I'm going to make
You're going to force me. Before I was at the Socceroos, I was with the Red Sox in Major League Baseball. Before that, I was with the Sixers in the NBA. Before that, I did some work at the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFL, Toronto Blue Jays, you mentioned, and worked with Pat at Texas Tech while he was in college. And all along, there's usually a couple of individual athletes or like consulting things in the background where it's what you see on Entourage as an example. It's not a sports example, but some of the players, once they get their $100 million contracts, will build their own staff for themselves. And occasionally I've been a part of some of those setups. So it's been quite a variety, and I think I'm up to 11 sports and counting now. So it's quite different. And usually in those roles, I have a physio background, so I'm a qualified physio, did a master's in psychology, and so it really ends up being what fits for those individuals or what's needed.
And a superstar Richmond Tiger growing up.
Superstar is a big stretch.
It could have been anything though if it wasn't for injury.
I love that story. It could have. But the fact I had surgery every year for 8 years in a row probably put it to bed.
Big fellas, they go down hard. Yeah. So you played for 8 years?
I played professionally for 8 years, but I was with Richmond for 5, and then in the VFL Richmond for another couple, and then went to Adelaide for a couple after that. So it was a longish career, but it wasn't what it looked like it was going to be when I was 17.
Doesn't matter. Your career right now is the coolest thing ever.
I'm going to visit Punt Road tomorrow to meet the team and hang with some of the coaches. So it so happens that we're in like the neighbourhood and perfect timing. But I realised the other day it's about 20 years since they cut me. And so this is the first time I've gone back to the club in 20 years. So it's going to be very cool. I can finally go back and be like, I've kind of
moved on.
I've gone above Richmond. I've gone beyond. Well, I was a shell of a man at that point, so
mate, I
feel good.
When you get cut and you never live to your potential for injury or whatever, it's always hard to go back in the building. But mate, as I said to you, we didn't really talk about anything besides just drinking piss and having a laugh in the pool, listening to Brown Dogs. We did, didn't we? Listening to Brown Dogs specials in the water in the pool there in Mexico. But it was only till after when we, that's the best thing about weddings and destination weddings and Bucks parties is you get to meet new people. And I was very fascinated about your role and what you've done. So that's why I'm truly very excited to ask you all these things, because they're so interesting when you're talking about the mind and how you can maximize athletes' performance and putting together culture. What is it that stands out when you've worked with? You just named pretty much every sport. I know you've worked at AFL. There's another one. You've worked with male and female, which is fantastic. What is it that stands out for you when you talk about character and blending in, something special? What's that recipe that stands out?
Geez, great question. I thought we were just going to talk about fun stuff, mate. No, this is fun.
We're going to get to Vegas later.
Yeah, good.
This is fun for me.
It is actually. I find it fun. So that's a cool thing. Is me nerding out on some of this is really what I do every day. And we're dealing with, I was on a call with a coach earlier who has to cut a player going into the World Cup who is the center of a team, right? And so it's a different conversation than when you're in the NBA and you're talking about extending a player who is earning hundreds of millions. And, it's just fascinating, some of the shit that we have to talk about, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to, I'm buying time for your question, right? Because I've given it thought, but I needed to just really get my head around the blending of either character and like you said, I do some of the other work that I do is about leadership and culture and team dynamics, I guess, is the nerdy way to say it, but how well a team works together. And either on a team level or on an individual level, the thing that stands out is the people who can just be in the moment. Like, you might have an asshole in the locker room and they're generally an asshole to everyone they work with or live with or whatever. But when it comes to doing their job, you can just be like, all right, let's be here and do the job. Now, usually that'll wear out, but you've seen great teams who might have some flawed characters on them, and you've also seen teams with amazing characters not be able to do their thing as well as possible. So whether it's at that team level or particularly on an individual level, those guys like Patrick being one of the ones that I've been blessed to cross paths with, it was clear early on that he was very good at being in the moment and just being real and authentic, and guys feed off that.
Yeah, it's great you said that. He looks like such a likable guy to be around. Is that something that you picked up straight away with him? First of all, and second of all, his development from when you work with him at Texas Tech to what you see now, is there a huge improvement? And have you seen some serious growth from, the habits you've kind of taught him and other things that he's learned along the way?
There's definitely improvement. Like when he arrived at Texas Tech and the first year we were working together, he wasn't even starting, and I think he was a one-star recruit. So for those who follow American sport, that's not good. It's good because it means he got a scholarship offer, but he only got one of them, or maybe two, right?
Crazy.
And so he was, but it was very clear early on, and the coach who, Cliff Kingsbury was the coach there, and he went on to coach with the Cardinals, just finished up there actually back at USC now, I think.
Is he? I didn't know where he was.
Just picked up there last week or the week before.
Nice. Back to college. Beautiful.
Yeah. And LA, what a spot.
I know. He looks like he enjoys the nice luxury.
So Patrick was the backup, but Cliff made it pretty clear early on, like, hey, this kid's good. Like I went and scouted him. He was the one who basically convinced him to go to Texas Tech. Not hard when you didn't have other offers, but Patrick was a likable guy. He also had pedigree, like his dad played MLB professionally in the infield for 12 years or something. So he's grown up around a locker room. But obviously then from there, being a one-star recruit with not many offers to where he is now, massive improvement. And it's cool that I can say I was a part of it. I'm not going to claim that I'm the reason because he is a driven guy. And one of the things that stood out early on was he would turn up. If he was told to turn up, he would turn up. He would do, if you put work in front of him, he'd do the work. And he was also, open and willing to, if he thinks this is going to help him get to where he wants to go, then he'd dive right into it.
It's impressive. What is it that you were teaching him? Or things, like you said, he was so good in the moment, but clearly you guys did some work together to, improve something, because he's out there quoting you all those years later in his second Super Bowl victory. What was it that you were going through? If you can talk about it, like what are the skills? Yeah,
the skills, like we can definitely talk about the skills or some of the tools that we work on, and this is Patrick or anyone else. But most of, I like to say that most of the stuff, if I'm doing work in that area with an athlete or with a team, it's usually not like I'm teaching new shit. Like you already know from the times when either you're in competition and you had your best periods of, like, I was on fire in that few minutes or in that month or whatever it was, and you ask that person, like, what was it like for you? The answer is, I don't know. I wasn't thinking. I was just doing my thing, right? And so when you actually help people recognize that it's not about thinking more and talking positive and feeling good, it's just, okay, let's remove all that shit and just let you not think. And then when people recognize that, it's then a matter of saying, well, here's something that helps you not think sometimes. And if we do this thinking in advance, you don't have to think in the moment as much.
Yeah.
So it's work, but usually once people latch onto it, like with Pat, he's able to say, 6-7 years later, I'm still using that thing that we spoke about in 16.
Crazy, man. So it's like those mental cues to block out the external noise and just stay present, essentially.
A little bit, and also a way of, I guess, a framework for how we think. Because a lot of times, as we grow up, and particularly traditionally, people will talk about, be positive and self-talk, and you got to feel good, look good, feel good, play good, all that sort of shit, which I believed thoroughly when I was at Richmond. Maybe that was part of the problem.
And then they pay good, apparently.
Yeah. And I managed to not get that last one. But the reality is that when, if you talk to elite performers, and this is one of the great, I guess, discoveries that I had when I got thrown into the fire in America. I ended up working, my first real job over there was with the Philadelphia Eagles. And I went along. I was trying to just get some data. I'd done some stuff, as you said, with an AFL team, the Adelaide Crows. So I said, I've done this with some AFL footballers. Will you let us have a go at your draft class? And they were like, oh, yeah, sure. Like, okay, yeah, we'll let you in the back door and do it quietly. And Chip Kelly, who was the coach at the time, came in, sat in the back of the room and walked out afterwards. And by the end of that day, I had a job. He was like, oh, this is good shit. We're going to give it to the whole team. Yeah. And so then I've discovered that what I've learned at college and in the AFL, not any playing the AFL down, but compared to the AFL, the NFL is a very big beast with a lot more money and stakes, and probably a little bit more cutthroat, right? They can literally cut people in the middle of the season and not pay them. That's the stakes they're playing with. But the ability to go in there, and then we had the NFL's leading rusher in the room, 2 number 1 draft picks, a guy who's been an All-Pro for 12 years. And what I discovered was that some of the stuff that I had learned at uni in psychology or I'd read in books, they were like, nah, this is bullshit, man. Like, I don't do that. And so I was like, okay, tell me more. And most of the time it ends up being whether it's those guys who are NFL All-Stars or NBA number 1 picks, or I've eventually been able to do some work with Navy SEALs and heart surgeons and at NASA. Like, it's been a ridiculous ride. And usually all these people who work in those very, very like critical environments where if you fuck up, someone dies. Am I allowed to say fuck?
Yeah.
Okay. Someone dies or someone loses millions, is that it's less about feeling good and thinking good. It's more about saying, okay, well, I don't feel good, but I'm going to do this thing even if I don't feel good. Or maybe I do feel good, but I still got to do this thing, right? And so that's where most of the work, Patrick included, ends up coming back to what's important in this moment. Recognize how you feel. We're not going to say it's not good to, I don't want you to feel shit all the time, but if you feel shit, can you still do this thing? All right, let's go do it.
It's impressive. Like you just said earlier, like just rock up. And it's a bit like Patrick's performance. I mean, I know we're talking about Patrick Mahomes. We've got other athletes to talk about, but he's on one leg for the whole series. Right. And he's probably crazy against Philly's team.
Well, they broke the San Francisco quarterback the week before.
Yeah. But their defense was like the best ever against passing. Like they only gave up 260 yards or something combined over the 2 games they played. Patrick's got one leg and he's got some fierce blokes coming at him. He actually, by the way, his offensive line gave him plenty of time, which was amazing. But the way he just slinged the ball and played, a bit like what you just said there, they just puts it all behind him. And
well, it was amazing to watch. Like, it's cool. And these are some of the, you mentioned names like Brady and Michael Jordan and Kobe. Like, the reason these guys are so magnetic and people can't stop watching them, we're looking right now at Jimmy Butler blowing up in the playoffs, right? I had Jimmy in the locker room.
He was at Philly, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he's a different cat, and not everyone's cup of tea, but you can definitely see why he's able to do what he did against, they're playing the number 1 seed, right? Like, no one has ever done that before in the history of the NBA. Well, sorry, in the history of the play-in, but to knock off Giannis as well, like, it's not just any team.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And he just gets out there and puts in, 56 in one game?
56 and then 42. They were down record. I think it was 16. They come back. He only played 7 minutes in the last quarter. Right. I was watching it yesterday. I was like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah, and he just turns it on. And so he's got this, I think he even said it in a presser, but he would say this when he was in Philly, like, I'll just do whatever it takes to win. And that means, like, sometimes it might look psychotic. This is my words, not his. He might look like a psycho. He might say and do some things in a locker room that you're just like, whoa. But that's because it's unusual for people to be that committed and dedicated and able to just tune out. Like, normally, we'd like to get along here. We've started this interview. We wouldn't come in here and just say, tell me about your life, right? But he would do it because he's like, well, this is what we're here for. Go.
He's intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and straight to the point. And what he's like, it's like he wants it now.
He definitely, like, he has a desire that he's never won anything, college or pros. And he would openly say that he was potentially the cause of some of that disharmony at other places, but that's his way of saying, and if you know his background as well, like, Jimmy grew up in a place called Tomball, Texas, which is not a pretty part of Texas. There are some pretty parts. That's not one. His dad wasn't even there when he was born, and his mum left him when he was 8. So this is a kid who's grown up being like, all right, if I don't fight, I'm going to die. And that translates in everything he does. He has a very, very tight circle around him. Some of the guys I worked with at Philly are now part of his crew. When he sees people that he likes, he takes them with him. And clearly he didn't like me. And so Jimmy has been able to fight and scrap his way from being at Marquette, which is not a big college, 2nd round draft pick, behind other people at the Bulls, ends up becoming a starter, kicks on to another. Like, he's been problematic to people who expect him to be sensitive to things that everyone else is, but he's not. And so, like with Pat, you were talking, this how we got on there. I was trying to remember why we were talking about Jimmy, because Pat has an ankle and he's also got all this expectation, but he's very good at saying, okay, I know the ankle's there, but thinking about it's not going to change it.
Yeah.
I know people expect me to win, but thinking about that's not going to change it. What's my job right now? And he's talented. I think I might have helped him recognize that in himself. I didn't teach it to him. He's Pat.
Yeah. It's two guys there. I mean, Jimmy Butler's a great story. And you know, the word him is now the trend. You know, everyone's him. I think Reeves was pumping out I'm him, and Jimmy Butler certainly is him at the moment. If he goes all the way, he's forever him. What he's doing is inspiring, and you can't not love. He just looks like a competitor. Mm-hmm. But I guess the next question I've got now off the top of that is, do you recognize blokes' upbringings and then tweak the way that you handle individuals with this stuff? Or is there a certain kind of, you know, as you said, the skills or whatever you said before, I can't remember what you said, but is it kind of like not a template, but with someone like Jimmy, are you sitting there going, I want to know a bit more about your story because you're a little bit different to someone else I've worked with before?
Yeah, I think, intuitively, I reckon I'm like that anyway. I remember, this is a weird left turn story, but
we like weird.
Yeah, well, all right. So I might be early 20s, and I'm with Richmond at the time, and I'm out drinking at some bar in Melbourne, and I've got a girlfriend at home, and this other girl's trying to hit on me, and the conversation turns to, you know, like, I'm very gregarious here, and she's like, you shouldn't be doing that. You've got a girlfriend. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm in this situation, I'll do this, but down there I'll be shy and quiet. Like, I'll flex and I'll fit in. You might actually even hear occasionally I'll curl my R's because I'm a bit of an accent slut. When I'm talking to people, I'll actually shape the way I talk a little bit. My brother hates it, but
it's what happens when you live in Brooklyn and wherever you've been living.
Exactly. And so this is something that I think I naturally do, but definitely when it comes to engaging with athletes, like even when I was in the AFL before I'd formally studied coaching in the AFL, doing work at Adelaide, handling Ben Rutten was different than handling Bernie Vince. And handling Paddy Dangerfield, who doesn't drink, is different than handling Taylor Walker, who does drink during games. No. And so, you know, you got to take people who they are. And as I went and then did formal studies in psych in America and particularly going down a rabbit hole, there's for all the nerds, all right? So if you want to fast forward about 10, 20 seconds, you can skip this, but contextual behavioral science is an actual scientific field with reproducible results that talks about personality is not fixed. So you and I, when we were in a pool in Vegas, are very different dudes than when we are sitting here right now in this studio. Give it a couple of hours, a few beers, but who knows?
Well, we did have beers, right? And they've exploded all over the roller media van, and Braden's filthy.
If only there was smell in the scenario here. But that's a proven thing, is that our personalities aren't based on like you are this person. It's when you go to work, you tweak it a little bit. When you go home, you move a little bit. There are some people who are fantastically consistent, and there are others who are like absolute chameleons and you can't work out who they are, but most of us are somewhere in between, and that's what you got to be wary of when you're not wary, you got to be aware of, and you got to be you got to allow for that, is that when I'm working with this guy in this context, I'm a white guy with a weird accent who is working with a black guy in the NBA, and there's all sorts of dynamics around that in their country and in their industry. And I can't just walk in and think I'm going to get the same reception as I got when I am in an AFL team. I didn't play very well, but I trained for a while, right? And I had surgery and I know what it's like.
Yeah.
He's going to look at me and be like, oh, here we go, another white guy, right? And so I got to be cognizant of that. And then not only is it important to keep that at the front of mind, you got to also then you learn things about people as you go, you know. I didn't realize you were a smart intellectual dude when I was just hearing the first stories of the first night at the wedding.
Which
I'm like, wow, this guy.
Which we won't get into. Yeah, no, it's well said, and you're spot on. It's there's so many, everyone's so different, and that's what I was thinking. Like when you're working with people so closely, everything would be. I mean, every day would be so different. I'd imagine, like you just said, you're talking about cutting blokes and making sure the coach says the right things so that the outcome is perfect in what can be as good as it can, even though it's a tough situation. And then you're dealing with the likes of a Jimmy Butler, which you just said, his upbringing, that is it makes me love him even more, how hard he's had to fight to get to where he is versus someone else that might have had it, a bit easier, and you've trained them, but they're at the end of the day, you're trying to teach them the same thing. It's so impressive, mate. The next question I've got is, that's probably a little bit to what you just said there. How did you go with the culture? Because I got a few WhatsApp groups with NFL on it today, and some of the comments are like, imagine like just the carry on, right? It's just like, have a go. Like, I think one guy come out and said, "Let's go, baby, let's get paid." Like, can you imagine the number? Draft. Yeah, the AFL draft. Like, the cultures, we're very different, right? And it would just never happen. But you're putting yourself in America at the moment, the way I'm thinking about it. So NBA and NFL especially, because I love these two sports. And you're trying to learn a little bit about their culture, but also teach them things that you've been employed to do. Mm-hmm. How long does it take you to start, slapping up with the boys?
Well, firstly, it's dapping up, not slapping up.
Dapping up, yeah. There you go. So I don't even know.
Yeah. Don't start with that.
Like, you don't know whether you're doing them ones or just these ones.
Thankfully, COVID put an end to some of the awkwardness because you just do this one straight away. But my education on that started well early, like when I was at Richmond, right? So I was a pretty confident dude, and I'd grown up without too many problems in my childhood, and was never exposed to getting in fights because I was 6'6", and most people wouldn't take me on. And then I get to Richmond, I'm drafted in the first round. I'm fucking high as a kite because this is the team I've always barracked for. This is great. And then someone asks me in an interview like that week, "How are you going to go when you play your brother in Geelong?" Because my older brother was playing in Geelong at the time. I'm like, "Oh, no, it'll be good. It'd be like in the backyard, but if I finally get to prove that I'm better than him." And this is just me being a smart ass, right?
Yeah, having some fun.
Now, he kind of knows that that's who I am. He's grown up with me. His entire team doesn't know. And so we play them in the preseason. Their coach plays that interview in their pre-match meeting.
Oh, you're kidding.
I get pummeled. He gets me after. He's like, "Don't," like he was angry. Obviously. Yeah, because he goes, firstly, why would you say it? Secondly, now I've got to go punch you on the field. And thirdly, I got physically pummeled because the whole team was into me the whole day, right? And so I was like, all right, that's not great. But I also was confident going into an AFL locker room and had Benny Gale yank my chain a couple of times, being like, "Hey, young fella, pull your head in, like slow your roll." And I was unaware, right? I was just happy to be at the club that I barracked for, and it was all, it wasn't arrogance. It was probably insecurity, if anything.
Yeah.
And so I learned to modulate my behavior there so I could fit in. And thankfully that paid dividends when I'm in America. I'm like, "Hey, don't come in here and be whoever you might have been at the Adelaide Crows, because these guys they don't give a shit who you are. And you just got to learn a little bit, watch and learn." And I was probably too cautious at that point, because I remember one of the guy who actually did the strip sack on Tom Brady to win the Super Bowl when Philly won it a few years ago, Brandon Graham, is fantastic dude, one of the nicest dudes, and he's a leader of their defense. And I'm catching up with him in like week 1 or week 2, and I know that he owns the locker room to a degree, right? If I win him over, I'm going to be good. And I'm like a little bit
nervous.
I'm nervous. I'm not showing it. I'm decent at poker, but I know inside I'm raging. I'm like, "Yo, man, you said you want to catch up after that session, right?" I'm doing the first hour of every day was me on a stage with the whole team. And occasionally I'd get a couple of players be like, "Hey, I like what you're talking about there. Let's catch up." So he's one of them in week 2. And I catch him after training as he's walking off with his pads and he's sweating. I'm like, "Yo, you still want to catch up tomorrow?" He goes, yeah. And so I got training, I got massage, I got the gym. Maybe we can do 3 o'clock. And I'm like, "All right, 3 o'clock, bet." And I dap him up and I turn around and I walk away. And I know that phrase partly because guys are saying it, but also it was a line in a rap song that I liked when I was 13. Because if you ask anyone when I was a teenager, I was like, I wanted to be American. There was actually, Rory Hilton used to actually call me, say that I wanted to be American. So maybe that's why I ended up there.
I think we all do.
Yeah. And so I had said to this 250-pound professional athlete, "I bet," dapped him up and walked away. And as I turn around, I walk away, I'm like, yeah. Like I say to myself, "What are you doing?" Oh my God, it's so cringeworthy. And I spend that whole night, I tell my girlfriend at the time, like, "I said this." She's like, "No," she's American. So she's like, "No, you've screwed it." And I catch him the next day and we sit down. I'm like, "Look, hey, I just want to start before we get into the topic. I just want to say I apologize if like the way I came off yesterday was like whatever and cultural appropriation, or he goes, yo, relax, man, relax. Real recognize real. Like, you're a good dude. We know you're a good dude. You ain't here to fuck with nobody. So you just do you. And it was like, okay, I can breathe. Like that's the big thing about fitting in any, particularly these places. If they know you're not there to get ahead, or you're like the GM's guy who's a spy inside, particularly it probably was helpful for me that I had no background in America and I didn't have a lineage that I came from, and I wasn't part of the white establishment in America. Like, I'm just a different guy, and they were able to see, hopefully, an authentic dude who was just there to help. So it definitely was a challenge. It was a roller coaster, and I was nervous a lot, but eventually, if you're a good bloke, it usually works out.
It does, and you are a good bloke, and it has worked out. But like, doing what you're doing, so this is what I mean, mate. Like, it's so impressive. Getting in front of a group of people, you get nervous naturally. And there's so much respect for anyone that's out there that does do public speaking and actually gets out what they're trying to, think about and say. When you're in front of these groups of, especially for me, I'm a massive NFL fan, obviously NBA as well, but it's a smaller locker room. But NFL, it's a massive locker room. There's a lot of egos, there's a lot of money, a lot of power. And as you said, there's probably a few trust issues with blokes on 1-year deals and not, guaranteed money is only for the guns. We know that some blokes are earning every paycheck, every catch and every reception and every match, right? So there's just so much going on. But when you come in and you're doing your 1-hour presentations with the whole group, like, how much preparation goes into that just one day? And then are you how do you feel? How do you execute your role at these big organizations and do it so well? Like, it must take a lot.
Nowadays I feel like I've probably reached my 10,000 hours of I've done this enough that if you say tomorrow you're going in, like, I'm just turning up to hang out at Richmond tomorrow, but if they were like, hey, can you give us a 20-minute whatever, maybe I'd go, okay. I'd be able to pull something out my ass.
You're being too nice. You'd be able to pull it out.
I'd be able to pull something out. But that's because, firstly, I got cut from the AFL before I wanted, and I was injured for more than half of my career. And so a lot of time while I was injured, I'd go out and do school programs, and I ended up facilitating and speaking when I'm 22, 23. I end up working, people might have heard of the Leading Teams group here. I was lucky enough to be in the right spot, and they sent me to New Zealand to run their business in New Zealand. I'm working with the All Blacks and New Zealand Cricket and New Zealand Breakers. When I'm 26, 27 years old, I'm running those programs. So I got a head start because my football career went shit. So that was helpful. I'm not shy, so that was also helpful. And then things happen where, like, you have a chance to be like, all right, I've got to be perfect, and maybe that's too much, or shit, let's ride with it. Like, coming into Philly was a huge learning curve, partly because of the culture in the locker room, partly because it was my first job, and I'm like, oh shit, I might have to go home if this doesn't work. But also there was a couple of turning points where one of them was they actually, after their off-season workouts, which in NFL they're in it right now, the optional training activities, which is there's a series of compulsory days that they spread out over a space of about 2 months. And I did that for them. This is what Chip hired me to do with the full team. And at the end of that, they were like, all right, do you want to come back and do full training camp? And in training camp, that means like 40 days back to back, no days off, boom, 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 boom. We're installing the whole thing, and they slowly cut the team.
40 days.
40 days is brutal. And NFL environment is not a good, think about all the conditions they have in the AFL right now about you got to have a day off here and a half a day there, and you can only start and finish here. NFL, I was in the building at 5, out of the building at 7, and I don't mean 2 hours later. I mean like 14 hours later, and that was 40 days in a row. And then the kicker was, before we got to that point, they were like, oh, so we're going to pay you to go to the military, go to the Navy, go to the US Olympic, go wherever you want to go to find the best mental program. You design what you think we should do. Come back, we'll do it. And I was like, how good's this? I've just left the AFL, and all of a sudden I'm designing a program for you. Perfect. So I go to all these places, West Point Military Academy, Navy SEALs, the US Red Bull, all these places. And I come back and I'm like, hey, here's this program. Think it's the best we can do. And it had I'll do a day here and I'll do some smaller groups here, kind of based on what I'd already done. And they were like, yeah, we thank you you sent that through a couple of days ago. I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure you read it because you didn't get back to me. They go, yeah, well, we didn't get back to you because we're not going to do that. Chip wants you to do the first hour of every day of training camp. And I was like, I don't think that's the right thing to do. There are multi-millionaires who've done this for 12 years who'll be looking at me going like, what the fuck do you know? And they're like, yep, we probably agree, but this is what Chip wants. So, they didn't say it, but they said, in effect, if you want to work in the NFL, you will do this. Otherwise, thanks for coming. So I was like, all right, I'll do it. And so then the next 40 days, I had about, based on the plan I'd done, I had about 6 or 8 days of material, which I burnt in the first week.
Yeah, of course. And then press.
And then I was going home every night, and 5 a.m. till 7 p.m. I'd go home, slam dinner on my mouth while I designed another session, and I went back to work. And
crazy, man.
Did it for 40 days. So that was the jump in the fire and sink or swim. So I managed to keep my head afloat, and then kick on to another one and do it again and do it again. It's reps.
It is reps, and it's some serious reps. I've got so many questions. Let's stay here for a second. You just said you used all your material up. I don't want you to share IP that you can't on this podcast because it's your work. But if you can share an insight to what are you talking about for 1 hour, right, for the week, let alone 40 days? Is it a consistent thing that you're talking about? Are you identifying great acts of leadership, or are you trying to break down conversations that aren't happening so that when they do happen, everyone can get on the same page? What is your sessions involving? Because I know for a fact when I was at a footy club, like leadership teams coming in, we were kind of like, oh, here we go again. Unless it was impactful, we'd be like, your eyes are glued, you're locked in. Some of it you disagree with, you're breaking down teammates in front of people that can impact the way they play. And it's not a serious enough business, I don't think, for AFL to tell people like what they're doing off field should be better when it's like that could impact a decision later on. You know what I mean? Like we don't want to be turning on each other. So like I'm just spitting out ideas here, but 1 hour session's a long time. How did you have these guys glued to you?
That's exactly what I was saying in my head.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Wheels are spinning, right? Well, eventually I was like, all right, well, I've got these sessions that I ran. They were based on training that the US Army did. They called it Master Resilience Training. I stole some of it, did it with the Crows when I was there. And the guys I adapted some of these exercises for had career seasons. And talking like Paddy Dangerfield, Bernie Vince, Rory Sloan, this is as they were coming up in the team. And so I'm like, oh, I think this works. Let's try this over here. But then I was doing it with 100 people instead of a group of 6, right? So the dynamics totally changed. I still tried to use some of those exercises. And as an example, there's probably 2 fields of psychology. Again, we're going to nerd out here for a second.
Nerd out.
One of which is called cognitive behavioral therapy. That's very much you can control your thoughts, which control your feelings, which then lead to actions. And the other is acceptance commitment therapy, which is I can't do shit about if I feel angry, I feel angry. But trying to control it is whatever. Just recognize you feel angry and then act the way you think you should act, not the way the anger wants you to act, right? Or nerves or whatever. And so there are some proven exercises from this field, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is very much where the military one came from, that were about, recognizing when your thoughts spiraling down, which I'd already done with some of the AFL boys. So we'd do that. We'd talk about when you have a bad day, like what happens? You're throwing an interception, Sam Bradford. What do you think? Where does your mind go? And that was fascinating to watch how a quarterback would handle throwing an interception versus a running back would handle fumbling the ball. Effectively the same mistake, but either position-wise, there was a little bit of a trend, or even just individuals. Some of them are just like, whatever, give me the ball again. And others are like, holy shit, they're going to yank me, I'm shit, mum will hate me, right? They'd go real far.
Yeah.
And so it's about helping the group recognize that these are processes that we all have, and then what's your trick going to be to get out of it? Because it's not like there's a one-size-fits-all. It's in times when you've been able to get out of that, what'd you do? All right, well, why don't we do that again next time and see what happens? And it's really just about exploring each person's path back to the present and being their best. And
you're doing that you're doing that in like the whole group? So
that was in hundreds. So I think we had 90-odd players in the training squad at that point, plus the 20-odd coaching staff.
Oh, so coaching staff's in the room?
Yeah, because they're the ones eventually, particularly on the sideline. Like I only get sideline, or in baseball I'd be in the dugout. Basketball, depending on the game, whether we're on the road or away, the benches were tight, and so I might not be there sometimes. And football as an example, I'm not on the bench with the Socceroos while the game's happening. I'm backstage or upstairs. And so the people who are actually there in the heat have got to be able to understand these concepts too.
So the coaches need to understand how they're thinking, therefore they can not yell at them if they don't like to be yelled at or whatever, just learn a bit more about it. It's a shared
language as well, is being able to understand that, like, yelling at someone, play hard, what the fuck does that do? That doesn't help anyone. Yeah. Tell him what he needs to turn his attention to. And that's probably the other field, is like some of the stuff that we teach is really just about helping people recognize this is how your brain works, and intuitively you know it. So like the one that Pat quoted in his when he mentioned me in the Super Bowl article is one of the simplest, but it's very, as soon as I'll walk you through it right now, right? Because there's this perception that like people like Pat have an amazing brain that can handle all of the things that are in front of him on a football field, which is true. He is very talented and possibly blessed in that area. However, there's probably only, based on all the research that there's been done in neuroscience, there's probably only 6 things that he can have in his conscious awareness at one time. Dumbasses might be 4. Let's say you and I are in the middle, right? We're a 5. So there's 5 things you can have in your attention. One is what I'm saying and my voice. 2 is you might be aware of the producer who's taking a camera shot right now.
Right now. Smile.
There you go. 3 is you might be thinking about the rain outside. 4 is the beers, and 5 is what am I having for dinner tonight, right? But that means you can't think about how your left foot feels. And as soon as you think about your left foot, you've forgotten about item number 2.
Yeah, you knock something off the perch.
And so it's one thing in, one thing out. And so eventually once you understand that model, you're able to realize, okay, if I'm thinking about whether dad likes me or not as a result of this play, it's probably not helpful. It doesn't help me do this thing that maybe it does help dad like me, but thinking about it's not going to help. And so then you create a little list of what do I need to focus on, and it becomes, that's your shortcut. As soon as you recognize you got things in here that aren't helpful, like the producer or the rain or the beers, then I've got to be disciplined and say, no, when I'm doing this thing, I've got to bring my attention back to here.
It makes, this is, I wish I had, we do have it when you're playing, but I never heard it like that, and even reading the article, you don't understand it as, it makes a lot of sense. And even with life, you might have your mates texting you and you're talking about that, and you got to do something at work, and you got something on the to-do list, and all of a sudden someone's calling you, and then one more thing happens and you've forgotten to get back.
What was I talking about?
Yeah, because it makes sense, because maybe I'm at the 4. I can only handle 4 things.
Hey, sometimes people wish they were at the 4.
No, I think I can handle a few, but you're definitely not. It just makes a lot of sense. Like I'm picturing if I was a quarterback, if you're trying to read the cut, you got the corners, you got the on, you got play call, whatever. Yeah. It only matters, one more thing that goes through, and you can imagine that's just that mistake that they make.
Right. So, and that's the ability, and also accepting I make mistakes. Like you cannot play perfect football, basketball, whatever, podcasting. And when you make a mistake, you're not trying to relitigate it or try and find a new solution. You're like, occasionally I will throw interceptions. I'm going to accept that one was one of those ones. Let's just get back and keep doing the thing. If I throw 3 in one game, maybe I've got to make an adjustment, right? Yep. But generally speaking, we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time we make a mistake. And their ability to be, and your ability to be here right now and say, okay, I've picked that thing up. I'm going to go with that. Have you ever seen a guy called Harry Mack, freestyler on like Instagram, YouTube, whatever?
No.
This guy, producer's nodding, he knows.
The panels, man, he's all over it, Braden.
And so Harry Mack is like, he explained it. If you're not familiar, look him up, Harry Mack, on YouTube or Instagram. He basically just walks around and freestyles, and he asks people to give him 3 words.
I think I have seen this guy.
He did it with the MLB crew the other day, the broadcast crew, and he had 12 different words. Wow. Just remembers them like this, and he goes around each person, and then he does a verse here, a 4 bars here, 4 bars there, and did them all. And it's phenomenal, particularly if you're like a hip-hop fan, but even not, you're just like, wow, this is pretty impressive. And he describes it as, I'm just ad-libbing the same way we have a conversation. Like I've practiced a lot, so I know this word rhymes with that word, but generally speaking, when you give me that word and I come up with a second word, it's like when I say, hey, how you doing? You say, good, thank you. Or you could have said, I'm okay. And either way, I have to take one of those things and run with it. And it's a little bit of back and forth. And I think I'm rambling a bit.
That's good.
But you're doing it yourself every time you do this show, right? Or every time you're having breakfast with a hot date, you're actually doing the game.
I wouldn't know what that's like. Dry as a bone. Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's just, were you amazed that the head coaches, or not even the head coaches, there's that many coaches, and I stick to NFL because I've got this visualization of you in front of 120 coaches, 90 players or something, right? Were you amazed that what you were teaching the group was really like, you were really educating the coaches? Were they like, this is groundbreaking stuff, this is fantastic, they hadn't heard of it before? Like, was it really new to them?
No, I could say that, but the reality is that even in the playing group, right, and even probably some of your listeners here are rolling their eyes and they've already turned off because they're like, this bloody psychobabble bullshit. If you're good, right? And some of the coaches are like that. Some of the players are like that. It's not, never do I walk in a room and expect that everyone's going to be like, oh, how good's this? And so with the coaches, there are some who are actively against it because either they're used to being the guy who does the mental stuff, or it strongly conflicts with what I was taught by my dad when I'm growing up is you don't talk about your feelings and you just fucking get it done. I'm like, well, technically that's what I'm teaching here, but there are different ways about it, right? And so, yeah, there are some who were all about it, and there are others who are like, oh, whatever, I've got plays to design. Can we hurry the clock up?
Yeah.
And again, you just got to work with what's in front of you.
Yeah, mate, well done. Do you think, if I was to compare baseball, let's just stick with America, baseball, NFL, and NBA, those three sports, what was the hardest?
Baseball.
Is that because you don't know enough about the sport, or just the way it's run?
No, it's good. I would equate it to like, so I worked in cricket, international cricket, and one of the first things, so I'm with New Zealand, right? Dan Vittori, all-time great, captain at the time. I fly in from New Zealand. They're already on tour, and I fly in to meet them in Bangladesh. And it takes 36 hours to go from New Zealand to Australia to Thailand to Bangladesh. And I'm wrecked. At this stage, my career is not going well enough that they fly me business class. So I'm a 6'6" guy folded up in. Oh yeah,
the big guys
4 economy flights.
Wow,
3 maybe. Anyway, it was fucking long. It was long. It was tough, and I'm not good with. I'm good now because I do it all the time, but I'm not good with changing time zones back then. And I land at like 8 a.m. I turn up at 10 a.m. Game starts at 11, and I'm out there as they're warming up, and Dan's, hey, how you doing, man? He's used to it, obviously. And I'm like, oh, good. I'm ready to go, positive. I'm ready to go. I'll just get some coffee in him. He goes, oh, well, good. Now, you'll find that when you're working in cricket, there's 2 types of people this game suits, and if you're not one of them, oof, good luck. And I'm like, oh, yeah, what's that? The old 2 types of people trick. And he goes, well, either people who think a lot, because you've got to keep yourself busy the whole time. You got to ball to ball. What happened here? What was he trying to do? What am I going to do next? And the commentators, they can make conversation out of anything, right? Or you just don't think at all. You're a guy who just gets out there and you can just have zero in your head for 2 hours and you're happy as a pig in shit. And I'm like, okay, I'm hoping I'm the former, because I know I'm not the latter. I wish, but I'm hoping I'm the former. And it turns out I wasn't neurotic enough to be entertained for 6 hours of. It was a test match. Day 1 against Bangladesh. The run rate I think was 0.8 or 1.2 or something. God. And I had never been to the cricket without drinking a beer, or stayed for an entire day of the cricket. And so I'm sitting in the locker room with the cricket team, and it was just like pulling teeth for me. I'm not hungover, jet lagged, not interested in the game, not really into cricket. And also just trying to get my head around a new job ruined me. But it was also the culture of that team was very much, not that team, the sport. They explained it to me as Brendan McCullum would say, cricket is like a group of individuals playing a team sport. Because when it's you and the bowler, it's just like your teammates don't matter. They can't help you.
Yeah.
And if you get it wrong, it's on you. And if you get it right, it's on you. And so that was their approach. And that definitely was the reason I'm talking about cricket when you asked about baseball, is because that was true as well. And
very similar.
Occasionally you'll have a guy who is like an absolute, so Curtis Granderson, who's on TV now with ESPN, I think, probably one of the nicest, most down-to-earth humans I've ever met within sport. He played for 14 years maybe at all the major franchises, legend, but super, super eloquent, very switched on, very self-aware, very helpful to other people. And then I've had, first-round draft picks, an MVP, a couple other people, and all of them are on a spectrum of get the fuck out of my way because I'm here to earn millions and you might fuck it up, to, oh, my God, please help me, I can't do this, and everything in between. But the dynamics of the situation mean that you've got to walk through with all these individuals and you don't get a group who are working on the same thing.
Yeah, now I get you. Yeah. They're all so different.
They play every night. 160 games in 180 days. It's bonkers.
Oh, and you were there with the Blue Jays and all these other Red Sox. You were there every day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, eventually with the Red Sox, as I said before, eventually you get moved up to business class, and eventually you get to a point in my kind of roles where you might be able to say, I'm only going to do home games, or I'll be with you for the major series, right? So with the Red Sox, I'd kind of gotten into that territory.
That's awesome.
But the Blue Jays, I did the whole thing non-stop, basically. Like maybe I would have 2 days off a month, but that would be go home, sleep, or go home, get drunk, and then go again.
It's a genuine. It's just so different over there, isn't it? Do they work harder, or is it just maybe? Nah,
it's definitely work harder. Like and it's not smart. I'm not saying it's the way to do it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like longer and
but they're not like
they get paid more as well, don't they?
Exactly.
Like it's like
it's not make work where they're like turning up and just pretending to write emails. You go to work, you do batting practice, you warm up, and then there's a game. And then you go home that night, or if you're getting on the plane, you might go from Toronto to LA. It's a 6-hour flight, land at 4 a.m., go to bed, get up, and play again at 12 the next day. Like it's absurd, and it is very bad for people's health and well-being. But they made that, the Players Association explicitly made that choice that if we can play 160 games, that means the pay packet is like this.
That's why they get paid so much more money.
And so that's the highest paid sport per season, but not per minute worked.
Yeah.
Whereas the NBA have it right. Like they have a lot of games, but their practices are relatively short because they play every 2 or 3 days. Sometimes you won't practice for a week. You just turn up, warm up and play. And that's, it's got its own foibles as well, because when you're not practicing, you feel like you might be able to go out. And
I've seen a few of them.
Stories.
Yeah, I when I first went to America, when you do something the first time, it's always eye-opening and so big and so cool. It always is cool, but the first time for anything is special. Remember we went out in New York and J.R. Smith smoking a doobie next to me, and I'm like, are you? And then I think, like next to me, like I'm like, is that J.R. Smith? And then, then I think there's someone else there. I think it's someone Noah.
Was that before the game? The one where he looked like he was like on the bench?
That was after the game. It was after the game. But I was just like, that's J.R. Smith, and you're thinking, and when you're a fan of the game, you're like, they just played tonight. They're playing tomorrow. It's like, geez, it might get on the other team here. But
fun fact for you and the listeners: if you're a betting person, I'm not, but I know this is.
We all love a bet.
This has apparently got some validity to it. Look for the teams who are traveling into major cities, particularly if they're coming from Oklahoma City or something like that. And if they have young fellas on the list, they're less likely to beat the betting line, because when you land in those cities, vamoose, straight to the nightclubs.
Oh, there you go.
And the next day they're a little bit scratchy.
I find it amazing that they can. I guess I've never played any other sport besides AFL, but NBA basketball's hard. Like when you go down the street and you might play ball and you're up and down for 15 minutes and you just blow on your legs, feel like jelly, right? It's a different kind of game. I find it amazing they can get on the Terps and then roll out to an NBA game where you kind of need your hand-eye coordination to be kind of spot on. Yeah. And they get it done. Like most of them get it done.
I mean, think about it like this, where like, how old were you when you stopped playing?
AFL, 27, 8.
Right. So by the time you get past about 22, 23, your body isn't the same. You're stronger, but you also feel aches and pains more. You might get more tired, travel, get you a bit more. And occasionally you might use caffeine, right? Give me some no-dos. Like I'm just going to try and get over the line today and we'll do the next one tomorrow. Baseball did teach me one thing, that substances are vital to do high-level performance, particularly if it's at that extreme. Like these guys will jack themselves up on coffee every night and then sleeping tablets to get them through to the next day, and then they do it all again, and they do that for 6 months. It's very unhealthy.
Yeah.
But that's their coping mechanism, and it actually works because they go out and produce performances that only 10 other humans on Earth can do. And NBA, they probably don't use it as much in terms of stimulants, and I'm meaning legal stimulants, just to be really clear, lawyers. Yeah. But the use of caffeine, the use of the sugar, whatever they are, the
gels. The gels. What are the chewing gum with caffeine, like military gum, all that kind of stuff.
Some of them use these little dip packets where they've got either nicotine or whatever in them. Like it's legal, but I wouldn't advise it unless I'm turning up to a game where if I play well in this game and I'm on a contract year and it's against this team where they're trying to weigh up whether they should trade for this guy or keep me, give me the extra shot of caffeine. Like, I got to get it done.
Yeah.
And so there are ways and means of making it happen. And it actually becomes a game of, rather than, and I know in the AFL in particular, sports science has a very strong hand, rightfully so, because it's probably the most physically demanding team sport getting around. Maybe ice hockey's up there. But it's probably over-indexed here, where there's Dane Swan proved that you don't have to be mad about your body and your fitness to be one of the best players in the world. And in America, that's a little more accepted because they've got a history of guys who are just like, I'll just do it. Don't tell me how to eat. As long as I turn up and get the job done, we're good.
Dennis Rodman style.
D-Rod.
It's and have you seen that when you've been at NBA franchises, especially the Sixers? But did you see blokes you could clearly see, I know you were out last night, and then a flop or get it done?
Yes. And usually the second.
Get it done.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there's no like questioning from the coach to them saying, well, I know you were out last night, or they wouldn't know.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it's happened. It's gone both ways, but I have better and more memorable stories of knowing, like, I might have gone out because I don't have to play basketball the next day.
Yeah, you're just chilling.
And I'm in LA and I have friends in LA, so out I go. And I'm hanging out with JK actually, and then we see a player on my team and we're like, yo, I'm going to have to turn the other way, but bro, I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, but
and then the next day, yeah. So the next day, and I'm like, oh, cool, this is actually going to be a good conversation starter for me to actually, because he's got a couple of things we need to address. But we're playing the Lakers tomorrow, so let's leave it be. And then dude turns up, looks bright-eyed and bushy-tailed in the morning. I'm like, oh, well done. And then goes back to the hotel. I know that he sleeps for a few hours between the shoot-around and the game, and then he comes out and he does his job. And not only does his job, he shuts down the person he's supposed to shut down. So there's like it is possible. And that was, I was very bit like when I was talking about the mindset stuff before about trying to think so much about being perfect and stuff in the AFL. I was very, very anal and attentive to all my eating habits and all my sleeping. Yeah. I gave up front row seats to Eminem because it was 3 days before a game.
Oh, wow.
What a wanker. And that was my last year. I got cut that year. And I look back, I gave him the Andy Cracker and I can't remember who else. And I'm like, I had these tickets, but I'm so close to getting picked here and I can't risk it.
Yeah.
And I look back now and I'm like, what a wanker.
But in saying that, it's like you always look back and go, oh, but what if I did something differently? So you're like, what a wanker, but I gave myself every chance.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you might have went there and they could have said, that's why. And you go, oh, fuck. So no, but I get it. You overthink preparation when it really, as you know, like the Swans of the world, and there's plenty of players out there we know, they just get it done.
And that's the other thing that baseball, definitely I learned because I had to do it as a coach, is there were days where I would just be like, nah, I'm about to quit. Like, I can't. This is my X number. I've lost count of the days I'd worked in a row. I haven't seen friends for a while. I haven't been home in 2 years because I was trying to get a green card. And I'm just like, I can't be bothered with this wanker who gives me nothing anyway. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, but I got to do it. Like, I want to be here. I want to be good. I want to help these people. So I'm going to just front up more coffee, more,
whatever it takes.
Sleep harder, get a nap in the equipment room, like whatever you got to do. And those athletes in particular taught me that if they taught me anything, they taught me that you don't have to feel good to do good. And that's the separator. I think, getting back to your first question, what's the thing that puts people apart? There are some who are like, they want to feel good and they pump themselves up and they're very good at it. But for the most part, you look at a Kobe Bryant, you look at a Michael Jordan, like the flu game is the best example ever, Michael Jordan flu game. He turned up having vomited, and depending on who you talk to about the stories beforehand, maybe he didn't have the flu, maybe there was something else going on. But either way, he turned up in terrible condition and produced an all-time performance. And if you ask any professional athlete, have you ever done that? Not the turning up in bad condition, but like, have you felt nervous and then still played well? Yeah. Have you felt super confident and played shit? Yeah. So why do we connect them?
Yeah.
And half of it is decoupling it and saying you're fine. You don't have to feel good. Just when you don't feel good, tune into the right things.
It's spot on. Spot on. And it's such a, you know what, thinking about it now, there's so much talk about how do you feel, mate? Like this is from coaches as well, which is probably not their fault because they need blokes like you, and that's why you get paid well to go to these bloody big franchises to say, cut that out. because we don't need to feel good. We just need to make sure that we know what our role is and execute it.
Yeah. Or sometimes it's valuable information. If you are vomiting before a game, I'd like to know so that I can either help you with your diet plan or we can adjust our game plan because you might run out of legs.
Yeah.
And so they're good questions to ask, but it's not that it's a bad thing where, how you feeling, man? I'm nervous. Good. You should be nervous. It's a fucking grand final, right?
So it is a good question. Take that back. There you go.
Oh, well, so it's just a conversation starter for me. I'm not necessarily needing the info, but I'm not going to tell a coach not to ask it because usually, why do you reckon they're asking it?
They just want to know a little bit about you.
And because they're probably fucking nervous.
Yeah.
And that's the way they handle it.
One of the things I was really keen to get out of you today was, how do you relate all this back to the people, you know?
The people.
Like the people meaning
people are people, you know?
Exactly. We can't be athletes, you know, the dream's over. You know what I mean? I was doing a bit of research listening to you talk about more athletes and the competitiveness. You were saying that stands out on one of these things I noticed on YouTube, right? And I was thinking, righto, but how do I apply all this stuff that you've got in your brain and all the things you've learned to everyday life as no longer chasing a premiership, no longer chasing a ring, like just being in the real world, you know, living, trying to be the best human and person and the best version of yourself, right? How can you apply one of these principles that you're teaching athletes to everyday life?
Well, that's actually the easiest way to say it, is that people are people, right? So these are all humans that I work with, and I'm lucky enough to work with some of, you know, Sam Kerr right now, and she is the best in the world in what she does, but she's also a human. And she has to deal with distractions and emotions, some of which are stronger and definitely more prominent. But inside, she's a human and she has the same circuitry as you for the most part.
Yeah.
And the ability for anyone, so I learned this by being drawn into, I was amazed the first time I walked into this room with Navy SEALs, NASA astronauts, fighter pilots, heart surgeons, and I'm just coaching baseball at that point. I'm sitting there like, how fucking cool is this? But also, I do not belong here because I just work with athletes. And if they screw up, they lose a contract, they go home, everyone's fine. You screw up, the patient dies, or the space station blows up, or we lose Afghanistan. Like, nah, I'll keep my part, thanks. And they're like, yeah, but internally, it's the same thing. Your brain doesn't see what's happening. It just feels the chemical signals. So it thinks that you missing a free throw is the same level of threat as kicking down that door and not knowing how many Taliban are behind it. And so internally, we're all the same. And I'm dealing with people who have very public, for the most part, issues, or if they're not public, they're private, but they could cost millions of dollars or could be incredibly damaging to their career. But again, if you're going in to present at work a PowerPoint for 6 people in a boardroom and it might get you a bit of a promotion, your brain knows no difference. In fact, your brain is probably more scared of that than shooting a free throw, because you have excuses for missing the free throw. And whereas when you're in the boardroom, like, you got to nail that. And so in that moment, same principles apply. Where should your attention be? When you're good, when you've done your best presentations, where's your attention go? What are the actions you focus on? And stop thinking about what you're thinking and stop wondering how you're feeling. Just do those things and maybe you'll be okay. Keep your 5. Maybe it's a 6, maybe it's a 4. Just pick however many you've got and have them in the front of your mind, you know?
It's great. It's great advice. I mean, it's not like life-changing, but it's a great reminder that people, you know, keep it simple. Mm-hmm. Keep it fucking simple.
Yep.
It's pretty much saying present, isn't it? Being present.
Absolutely. And dealing with, like, I think the catch with some of the, going back to the nerdy stuff, the cognitive behavioral things about feeling good and thinking, controlling your thoughts, is that most of that is usually an avoidance behavior. You're trying to avoid feeling bad, right? Instead of saying, I'm trying to move away from bad stuff. But in reality, when you have the best moments in your life, whether it's the best game of your life, best presentation in your life, best sex of your life, it's because you are moving towards something you want. You're not trying to like, I don't want to fuck up. I'm actually just like, wow, this is cool. I'm going to go do this thing, even if I feel nervous. Even if I have an injured ankle, even if the cat ate my homework, I'm going to go and do my thing.
Even if you go to Vegas on your own and you don't know most of the group and you run into a few weapons,
turn up and
you find a way, don't you?
You find a way.
Oh, mate, that's brilliant. Well done. It's incredible insight, and I think we've gotten to, I think we've taught everyone listening and watching, and we can't thank everyone enough for their, for always tuning into this podcast. But I knew there'd be some gold here, and I just had to dig it out. And I feel like
you've taught them because you did the digging.
I reckon I've dug out we'll go with the 5. The Patrick Mahomes 5. Did he say 6 in his article or
6?
5?
It's Pat though.
Patrick Mahomes. If you want to be like Patrick at 6, he'll probably get 6 rings as well. That bloke, he's a machine. Before we move on to our lovely sponsors here, RIXX and Milwaukee Tools.
Love RIXX and Milwaukee.
Athletes that you've worked with, who are the coolest ones? Like I've seen photos, just on Instagram or when I was researching, but you're on the court with, I think it was Jimmy Butler and Embiid. I think you're guarding Embiid in a couple of photos. We're talking about probably the MVP this year, and Philly can go on and probably win it. They're going to be right there. You just spoke about being at Philly, how much I love NFL. And then I don't know a lot about baseball, but there's a lot of people that do love their baseball, and there are some superstars in that league. You got AFL, you got cricket in New Zealand. You're now dealing with Sam Kerr, who's a superstar, one of Aussie icons. All these people you deal with, obviously it's normal for you now, but have there been any pinch yourself moments where you go, fucking hell, this is like your old man might call you or your brother Tommy might call you. How'd you go, mate? What'd you do today? Oh, I was just guarding Embiid. Like that would have been a conversation down the track.
That was actually the Embiid moment was occasionally I'm 6'6", so I can actually be on the court and not look ridiculous. He made me look ridiculous, but he makes everyone look ridiculous.
Yeah, that's all right.
But I was just called in because one of the assistant coaches was out, and that happened to be like I think 2 or 3 years to the day from the moment I sat with my brother who was doing a story on Ben Simmons because he works at 60 Minutes.
Big shout out to your brother who's killing
Big shout out to Tommy, yeah. And I sat with him after he finished the interview with Simmons. We were sitting up in the nosebleeds, and there was just something I had a feeling. I'm just like, I think I'm going to work in the NBA. I think I want to work in the NBA. I took a day off with the Blue Jays at that point just to meet my brother in New York. And I was like, I don't know. It just feels I should do this. And then it might have been 2 or 3 years later to the day, I was guarding Embiid on that court at Madison Square Garden. It was pretty surreal. But the most surreal for me was we're in Miami. I'm with the Sixers. We're playing in Miami, and we get I can't even remember how it came up. But anyway, word gets around, or it comes through me actually, might have been our team security. Hey, Will Smith has asked if you want to go with a couple of players or if a couple of players want to go, but they're asking you because you're like the guy who works at that level with the guys. And I'm like, what? Because as I said before, when I was 13, I wanted to be American, borderline wanted to be Will Smith, watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, watching the NBA, and all of a sudden I'm working in the NBA, and Will Smith, who's a minority owner of the Sixers, is recording Bad Boys for Life, I think, in Miami at that point. And so I go with Tobias Harris, Boban Marjanovic, and there was one other player, I can't remember his name right now. And we end up going and sitting in Will's trailer and just talking smack for 30 minutes, an hour, and I'm just sitting there like, this is surreal. This is like one of the most famous men on the planet, and I am a massive fan. I'm in awe, but I'm also like, oh, he's just a dude, and he's asking these guys how they handle pressure, and they're asking him, and it's just like one of the coolest things I've ever been able to do.
Just a pinch yourself moment. Yeah. That is awesome. Will Smith. Yeah, that's good, isn't it? That's what I love about America. Yeah, there's that many stories.
Yeah, you're running.
How many stories can you? I reckon you create so many amazing memories, especially if you're on the piss and you got some great contacts. Like you just find yourself in these scenarios.
You know what happens when you're on the piss? You say yes to more things, right?
Yeah.
And this has happened a couple of times. The Philly example, right? I wouldn't have been working in the NFL if I didn't say yes to something I thought was ridiculous. The Will Smith thing, it's an obvious yes. I end up getting invited to speak at something where a NASA, the chief flight officer for the NASA International Space Station is in the audience. She comes up and says, "Are you ever in Houston? If you're in Houston, can you come by?" Yeah, all right. I mean, it's NASA. It's cool. It'll be a good story, but whatever. I end up controlling part of the International Space Station. Like I'm on a joystick. There's a photo and a video of me being like, is that actually moving? I'm looking at the Earth using this thing that I'm moving on. And there's just these sorts of things that only happen. And this is why occasionally getting drunk with people who you're comfortable with is okay, because you say yes to things. Yeah. And it leads to adventures, sometimes not good, but most of the time if you're with good people, it's good.
It's always good. It's always good, mate. It is always good. Oh, that is awesome. Will Smith stories, that's incredible. I didn't know he was a part owner of the Sixers. Didn't know that. Didn't know that.
He's been for a while, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, mate, I don't think I've this is I don't think I've seen a pair of RIXX on your head. Maybe you stole mine when we were poolside.
I probably did, actually.
These are
because you always look so cool in those.
I think I lost all my pairs of sunnies over there. Tribeca Crystal Grey, the grey polarized lenses. They are yours, my friend. All of they're from RIXX Eyewear. For everyone out there, you know the deal. Go to rixeyewear.com.au and use the discount code ACES if you want to look like Paddy. Who's going to be rolling into Will Smith's after party at the next Sixers game. The Tribeca Crystal Grey is what you're wearing.
This is what I needed when we were on day 2 or day 3 of the wedding party that we keep talking about.
What was that nightclub that we were really enjoying ourselves?
I do not remember for good reasons.
I'm trying to think because I've had a few messages. I don't know why they're messaging me. They should be messaging Brown Dog. G'day Trano. Saw that you're talking about Vegas. Where should we go? I'm thinking, mate. I just followed the pack.
Exactly. I followed the crowd, and I ended up. I believe you might have been my saviour in that instance. I
did. There was a couple
I
of
needed
us.
these the next day. But yeah, they are very good. Do I look as cool as you now?
You look cool, mate. You should never ask me. I always think people look really cool, especially when they're rocking your own sunglasses. But they do look cool. And the Tribeca, they're one of our best frames.
Good colour.
Yeah, crystal. Like when you're wearing a black suit, I can already visualise you at the Socceroos or Matildas or whatever, just on the bench pre-game with the ball under your foot with the sunnies on.
You know what? If the World Cup that's coming up for the women wasn't in the middle of winter, I'd wear them to a game. But no, you know what? I will anyway.
You can always wear them. In America, they wear them courtside.
Can you do this? Or am I just showing how old I am?
No, you got to leave them on just for 2 more seconds, but you can wear them. I just want to ask you, you've travelled well. We do a segment here, RIXX and Retirement, which is all about fake money. So we don't want money to be an issue here. I want to give everyone an insight on if you, Paddy, were to retire in the world, where's the one place you would retire if money was an issue, and take your RIXX Eyewear with you, and why?
Wow. There's a few. I like to say I don't have favourites. I have top 5s, but I'm not going to ruin your segment by going through a top 5.
Top two, maybe.
Top 2. All right. If I wanted to stay within reach of civilization, Manhattan Beach in California is a spot that I've got a soft spot for because it's still within reach of the LA and the New York life, but you're sitting on one of the most pristine, longest beaches, and it's a very well kept area. But if I was really escaping and I was just going to kick back somewhere, the best beach I've ever been on is a place called Zanzibar, just off the coast of Africa.
Okay.
Went there after the World Cup in 2010 and very much needed a recovery at that point. Mm-hmm. And this place is just spectacular. It's like white powder beaches. It's got an old town that looks like it's from Africa. It's got a new town that looks like it's Europe. It's got a new train of backpacking people coming through every week. What more can you ask for if you're going to kick back and do nothing for the rest of your life?
I've never heard of it.
Do yourself a favour. It's an island of Tanzania, or Tanzania as they call it there.
That's special. This is what I love about this segment. Everyone's got a different spot, and they even the last 2 or 3 I've never heard of. I was just thinking.
I might have just made that up. Can you get on Wikipedia and add that to the?
I should start writing all these down because I think our hit list with the RIXX and Retirement hit list, besides from one bloke, some bloke said something horrendous in the country, and we looked at him and said, surely not.
What's a JK saying a chuka?
I can't remember what JK said. He might have said of a chuka. No, JK wouldn't settle in a chuka. You can take them off, mate. Thank you for playing along with that one. And our friends at Milwaukee, they're so good and they're so kind. And again, you don't come on here empty-handed, big fella. No, I know you're still.
This is so good. I need this.
Yeah, well, you get this. And I was thinking, if you were flying to the airport today, that's why I called you. I said, mate, you're not going to hire a car or something. I know you're going back to someone's for dinner afterwards. Milwaukee have given you the pruning saw tool only there, and you got the starter pack over there with the chargers, the superchargers that is. So you're ready to go. You can get to work at mum and dad's and maybe look after the hedges or whatever you need to do in the backyard. But mate, when it comes to tools, how handy are you? Do you go all right?
Pretty not handy. I have lived in enough apartments and hotels, particularly with all the travel you've heard about, going around with these teams. I'm not at home very often. So when I'm home, I'm not wasting time fixing shit up too much.
I don't blame you.
I'm like, I'm going out to eat. I don't cook and I don't fix my house. I get people to do that for me.
Yeah, I'm with you, mate.
Yeah.
We were just chatting before. If I've got an issue.
My dad will hate hearing that.
Oh, mate.
All those lessons.
I think I changed. I shouldn't say I think I did. It was a bit of a bit embarrassed, but I changed my first tyre about 3 weeks ago. And my old man.
How'd you go?
I did well, mate. It's not that hard, but I just never had to do it. And I go, my old man, mate, you wouldn't believe it. I fucked me tyre and all that. So it was actually leaving my apartment. So it was actually underneath. So it was pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, mate, it wasn't that hard. But when he was doing it, he was stressing out and talking about the 5 things on his finger. I'd tell you, he was thinking about belting me as he's 6. Like, that was coming to number 1, mate.
1 through 5.
Yeah, he was forgetting how to unscrew the tyre.
Will I jab or hook first?
He was thinking about how he's going to belt me because I had so many questions, like, what do you do here? And he's like, mate, just fucking leave it. Just unwind this. And anyway, I'm changing the tyre with him. And as he's doing it, he's on his back, he's on his back and because my Jeep's got this little tyre underneath the back of it. And he goes, just keep fucking winding it because it wouldn't drop out and you got to unclip it or whatever. And as he's doing it, I'm not really doing much because only really a one-man job. And I said, mate, you should be ashamed of yourself. Your son, which is me, I'm fucking hopeless, but I'm only a product of me father.
Whack.
He went, he wasn't happy. He goes, mate, you fucking tits on a bull. You're fucking hopeless, mate. I've tried to teach you when you're a young fella. You wouldn't listen. But I actually don't reckon growing up, I don't know. My old man was always like, I'll fucking do it, mate. I'll do it. So
there's a bit of that, but also I reckon there was I don't reckon, no, I have used a chainsaw once, but I don't think there was often things to fix because also I had 3 brothers. So I'd be like, what about, I did it last time.
Yeah.
It's his turn.
Oh, yeah, right, actually. It reminds me, they looked after me so well, I didn't really have to fix anything either. But back to this Milwaukee Tool, the handiest moment of your career, can you think back to, you've got a really cool story, and we could do another podcast when you're back. I just really wanted to dive into what you're doing and some of the people you've worked with, but we could go back to talk about, footy and all those journeys you've gone on from study and how you found your feet. But has there been a moment where, like a pivotal moment, like one of the handiest moments, a Milwaukee Tool handiest moment where you're like, fuck, that got me that door opened up. Like that was me. Like that gave me the opportunity to do this. And when you reflect, you go, that actually kickstarted my career. Yeah.
There's a couple, but I would say the one that jumps out right now is every off season when I was either playing late in my playing career or working in the AFL, I would go to America because I loved it, and it was a tax write-off as long as I visited one sports team, right?
Paul Connors that, man. I don't think he believes my...
PC was looking after me at one point. I'm sure he did it.
Well, geez, I don't...
Maybe he just doesn't want you to leave.
Well, then he gave me the spray for spending however much money I did. I don't think they could have tried it.
I would go over there, and as long as I visited a college and pretended it was I'm learning, then tax write-off.
That's where I went wrong.
Yeah, right? Exactly. You were learning different stuff.
I was dumb.
And so I would do that, and every time I went, it would get more and more like, oh, wow, I can go over there. And I ended up being at USC, and I'd go to the college that I ended up going to. And so that was very helpful. That was handy. But probably the most handy, if I lead into how I actually somehow, a white guy from suburban Melbourne, ended up being shit enough at AFL to get out early, but then also landing in America and working in all these places we've just spoken about, is because one of the spots I ended up visiting was Oregon. University of Oregon up in Eugene, Oregon. And I went there mostly because the Nike factory was there and I could get some cool shit. But also, I've got to write it off as a tax thing. So I'll see if I can get into Oregon football somehow through a connection. In fact, it was Michael Regan, who used to head up Catapult Sports. We went to the same high school. I knew he was working over there. I was like, hey, you got anyone in Oregon? He goes, yeah, matter of fact, we're at Oregon football. I go and meet with their chief of staff, who's basically Chip Kelly's right-hand man. Get along well. We talk shop, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I go back home. 2 years later, they fire Sando at Adelaide. I get a buyout of the rest of my contract, and I'm over in America studying in Philadelphia. And then Chip Kelly is, well, maybe I'll ring that guy and see if, what's going on. And so it was more, I don't know, it's not handy in the terms of I created something physical like the great Milwaukee Tools will help me do, but it definitely built a very, very small avenue for me to run through, and luckily enough, I was able to fit, and off it went.
That's
a dap right there.
There you go. That is elite. And it's so funny how I think a lot of people do say that. Just say yes. Have a coffee with that person. You never know where it can go. And all of a sudden he's the coach of Philly and you're in front of 100 people. Awesome.
Big people.
Oh, yeah, big. Plenty of
humans.
big men. Mate, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to see you as well. I'm sorry about the beers. I must shout out Jordan Taylor, I'll say the son of BT. You'll hate hearing that. He's a great friend of mine. He come around at Super Bowl. He left them in my fridge, so I thought I'd get them out today. And
absolute stitch up.
And then you've cracked it.
Absolute stitch up. He's clearly done this as a time bomb. He shook them before he put them in the fridge, thinking that you would get it.
He has, because I think it's karma for stealing his beers. But yeah, I thought I'd bring in 4 beers and we'd have one each or 2 each. And
luckily I was sensible and I said, look, this is a work thing and I'm not going to do that. But let's open it up to air it out so that when it comes to 5 p.m. on a Friday, which it is, then I'm allowed to do it.
Yep, Friday knockoffs. And what'd the can do? It's exploded all over the rolling media van.
He was as excited as I was when I walked in here.
I tell you what, Braden's not happy with me. That's the first spillage in this elite van.
It smells like a good Richmond pub, though.
It smells like Vegas day 4 at the doghouse. Mate, thanks so much for your time. As I said, when you're back again, we'll do this. Hopefully, we'll see you. I'm actually going to New York for my 30th, 28th of October, with the family. So you'll be there, won't you?
Well, October, I should be able to be there at that point. Yeah. There's a heavy period coming up in terms of soccer work right now. NBA, NFL off seasons are, bit of breathing room, but by the time that rolls around, America will be cranking. You'll be right in time for...
Yeah, but it's a family trip. When I said family, and my old man's 64, I thought, where can I take the old boy and really show him what I've been talking about the last 10 years? I'll have to give you a call.
Just New York City?
Yeah, we're in New York, but I'm going to try plan to get to some stuff and catch up with some people over there. Hopefully we can do some podcasts with some American athletes while I'm there. Yeah, and maybe
get the trailer.
Yeah. I think so. Braden's looking pretty...
How do you get this to America?
I don't know. I don't know if we can drive it to New York, but we could do something, can't we, Braden?
We'll get an RV over there.
Yeah.
I would have thought that this thing is so magic it could fly.
Couple of wings.
It is. It's a special van. This, if we could just teleport it there, it'd be special. But mate, thank you so much. Again, thank you so much to everyone that tunes in weekly. These podcasts are, the reason that they're so fun is the guests, but also people that write in and message us and tell us what they love about it. So then when I can ask the right questions. Thank you to everyone that tunes in, and make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll catch you on the next one. But Paddy, thanks so much, brother.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Tommy Talks, where you literally can't thank you enough for all your support. Speaking of support, Milwaukee's MX Fuel equipment system revolutionizes the light equipment market by delivering the performance and durability demanded by the trades. From the MX Fuel cut-off saw and MX Fuel sewing machine to the MX Fuel power supply and the MX Fuel tower light, MX Fuel has you covered, without the hazards associated with emissions, noise, vibration, and the frustrations of petrol maintenance. MX Fuel, equipment system, equipment redefined. Righto, we'll see you on the next podcast.